Hey Pitcrew, this review is going to be a little bit different. In this review, I'm going to be taking a look at Qubic's new pivot system. So instead of having 4 actuators, you're going to have their bar up front or in the back, I recommend the front, with the 2 actuators in the back. And it really gives you a new way of being able to get into motion, keep it relatively affordable, cuts the price down in half, with the ability to upgrade in the future. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to test the rig in the 3 DOF setup with the 4 posts, and then I'm going to be switching over to the 2 DOF setup with the bar in the front and give you my take on my experiences of how I felt the car was behaving on track with the motion. Before I get into the review, like all of our videos, Qubic sent this product for me for review for testing purposes, but everything in this video is my own opinion, my own take. They have no say in this video, so I just want to give you as much information as I can so you can make a good judgment call on by yourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few sections from different tracks. The first one is going to be with the 4 actuator setup, the 3 DOF setup, and then I'm going to switch over to the 2 DOF setup with the bar in the front. And the tracks that I've chosen the Nürburgring for its quick changing corners and the carousel. Then we're going to go to the Red Bull Ring for its elevation changes, and then we're going to end it off at Sebring for its really bumpy track surfaces. So I'll do a few sections at each track, and I'll show you how the motion differs a bit. But again, you get this setup if you want to get into motion for about half the price. So both settings are going to be in the stock configuration. I'm not going to be using my belt tensioner because I just want to show you the motion, talk to you about how I feel with the motion without the belt tensioner getting into the way. All right, here we are at Nürburgring in the BMW M4 GT4. I'm not going to show you the whole track. I'm just going to go through some of the important parts that I think really shows off the motion the most. Okay, here we go. So we're already done doing our warm-up lap to get the car in the working in the right temperatures, and we can push. And right at the beginning, we're at the Hudson box section. This is the part of the track that starts going downhill with a few S's before going uphill with a fast right, left-hand corner, and then a straight. So going downhill, I feel the front dive in with the rear lifting a bit to give us that same feeling of going down a hill. Now to the corners, turning into the fast right, I feel the car heaving, leaning into the corner. Now left, the same thing. Braking, the front dives, and when I hit the right curb, I feel it first in the front right, and then I feel it in the back right. It's the same thing in the next set of corners. The final corner before going uphill, I feel that dive with the lean to the left side, and now going uphill, the front rises first before the rear actuator dives. Every movement from each actuator is really very distinguished, but gel together to give you a very accurate feeling to what the car is doing on track, and the sensation of the weight transfer is accurately simulated with the movement. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to try it with the rear actuators, and then pivot on the front. Again, here we're going downhill. I feel the front dive because the rear actuators are raising up above the pivot to give you that incline feeling. It feels very similar to the 4-post setup, just not as much. Now going to the corners, the rig goes left and right, and I feel each side dropping as I go through the corners, which makes sense since the bottom of the pivot is curved, and it's going to lean in that direction the actuators are leaning to give you that sensation. Again, a very similar feeling to the 4-post setup. Now when I hit the curbs, things are slightly different. I feel a bit of numbness when I hit that curb with my front tires. I feel it, but not to the degree of the 4-post setup. For example, on the right curb, I feel the rear actuator drop to give you that feeling of the front rising, but it's not as sharp as if you had the front rising. The feeling with the setup is a bit softer, which makes sense, again, because the rear actuator is doing all the work to compensate for the lift of the front and then the rear lift when hitting the curb. Now going up the hill, the gap is closed again between the two setups. I feel the rear drop to give me that initial lift sensation of the front, and then the rear drop some more for that full effect. It's a really smooth transition to give you a similar effect with the 4-post setup. Now let's jump to the carousel. Here is a spot that will really test the two systems. First up, the 4-post setup. Here we are going to the carousel, and right as we hit it, I immediately noticed the front drop with both posts dropping down quickly with direct feedback, and then with that effect, the rig leans to the right with a high camber, and the front and the rear posts leveling to get us out of that sudden drop and then coming out of the corner. We get the reverse effects as we rise out of the corner and level the car plane as we get a momentary weightlessness effect. All of that movement is done rapidly with very sharp effects coming from every post, but again, gelling well together to give you that overall effect of car movement through the corner. Now with the 2-post setup, it's a bit different here. I feel the dive. Not as much though, I feel the lean just the same, and coming out it, I feel the car lift. Now with the 2-post setup, the feeling is more numb and soft. You get the same sensations, but they're not as pronounced. And it makes sense because you don't have the front actuators to do the work to create that lift, and the rears are trying to do the work of the dive and lift of the car. The bar in the front doesn't really do anything, so the rears are trying to compensate for the heave sensation. With only 3 inches of travel, the system can really do so much for that effect. But the roll effect is on par with the 4-post setup. You feel the lean the same way. The rig leans left, you get pushed left. Lean right, you get pushed right. And that makes sense because when one post drops and or lifts with that front bar curved, the front is going to lean in the same direction too. Going back to the topic of heave, now it's time to jump over to the Red Bull Ring to fully test it out. And I chose this track because the road surface is relatively smooth. You're not going to feel a lot of bumps or anything like that. And with the 2 long straightaways that go uphill and then a downhill, we're really going to be able to test that heave motion, the going back and forth with the rig on the 2 different setups. So here we switch back to the 4-post setup, and as we go up the hill first, I feel the rise in the front of the rig, and it's really pronounced right as we get to the end of the straight. My body is getting pushed back into the seat with the angle of the motion it's giving. Now on the second straight, it's the same exact thing. It's a slow incline until we get closer to the corner. I feel the angle much more at the end of the straight. Same thing, I'm getting pushed back into the seat. Then after that, after we clear that corner, we're going to start going downhill, and I feel that decline slightly as we approach the corner, and it becomes much more pronounced and start having that feeling of going forward in the seat, especially as I start braking for the corner. The heave effect feels very realistic. The lift and the dive of the car going up and down the hills matches to what I see on the track, making it really feel very immersive and connecting the dots of what's going on the track and what you feel in the rig. Now let's go back to the 2-post setup and compare. Again, starting on the main straight, and as we go up the hill, I feel the lift, and it lifts even more at the corner, like before. It's not as pronounced as the 4-post, but you still feel it. Going up the next hill, it's the same thing. You get a lower sense of going up the hill, but what about going down? As we go down, the raising of the rear post does a really good job of giving you that dive feedback. Again, it's just not as pronounced. I kind of said it with my Nordschleife take. The rig lean is virtually the same as the 4-post setup. The area that's going to suffer the most is the heave, especially when you're going up and down the hills, because normally we're going to start on a 4-post setup, your car's going to be looking this way, so when you're starting to go up the hill, your front's going to start going up, but your rear is going to start going down, giving you that sensation of going up a hill. And then same thing when you're going down a hill, the front's going to go dive, and then the same, your rear is going to lift. With the 2-point setup, the 2-DOF setup, you're level with your bar and your actuator, but now you got your rear doing the same thing, which is really going to half the amount of motion that you're going to have, so it's not going to be as pronounced. But with the lean, you're going to get the full effect because your rear posts are doing all the work and they're opposite of each other, so when one lifts, the other one's going to drop, doing that pitch and roll effect. It is going to be affected by the heave motion depending if you're going up and down a hill. Now let's try another effect and see how the road feel feels. So here we are, we're going to go with the Porsche GT3 at Sebring, and I can't really think of a bumpier track that's out there. Alright, so here we are, we'll look at the road surface and curb effects in the 4-posts first. Like I said, Sebring is a very bumpy track. Just getting on the track, I can already feel it in the actuators, and I can tell exactly where the bump is coming from. I feel it in the front first, and then the rear, and I get a really good feeling of what all the components of the suspension are doing to keep the car stable as I go over this really old school washboard. When I hit a curb on the left side, I'm going to feel that lift on the front left actuator, and then the rear left actuator with the added texture effects of the curbs. And it's going to be the same thing when I hit a right curb and feel everything on the right. You can tell the suspension is working really hard to keep the car balanced in check. The feedback you get is very sharp and crisp. It really makes you wonder how real drivers are able to do those long endurance sessions in real life and not rattle their teeth out. Now let's see how the 2-post does. Getting on track, now I can tell there is a difference. I feel the bumpy road surface, but it's a bit softer now. I can still feel when the car goes over a bump. You feel the bump up, but only get it from the rear actuators, so you do feel it twice, but it comes from the same area now. It still feels a bit natural. I still feel everything in my rear sensor area, but just not at my feet anymore. It's the same thing when I go over a curb. If I had a left curb, I feel it twice like I would on a 4-post, but it's going to be in the same area. So let me explain it a little better. On a 4-post setup, when you go over a curb, the front is going to respond first, so it's going to rise, and then as the rear of the car goes over the curb, the post is going to lift up too. And eventually when you go off of the curb, the front's going to dive, and then the rear is going to dive, and eventually it's going to level off as the car gets back on a level surface. On the 2-DOF setup, since the front is stationary height-wise, the rear has to do all the work. So when you go over a curb, the rear is going to dip to give you that front rising effect, and then it's going to go up again as the rear touches a curb. And coming off the curb, the actuator is going to rise a little bit more, and then it's going to level off to simulate that experience of the angle changes, and it's going to be the same thing with the road textures. I hope I was able to explain things pretty well and give you a good solid understanding of the differences between a 3-DOF kit and a 2-DOF kit. Are there limitations with a 2-DOF with a pivot kit? Yes, for sure, no question about it. But that gap was a lot smaller than I originally thought. When it comes to the effects of the pitch, roll, and road feel, it gave me all the information I needed to know to understand what the car was doing. It gave me the right amount of information, but just at a softer level. Now, heave is where the 2-DOF kit suffers a lot because essentially you're on an axis and only on the back. The rears are doing all the work, so you're having the amount of travel angle that you have at your disposal. It's not immersive braking, and you're really only going to be able to tell the difference if you're going from a 3-DOF kit to a 2-DOF kit. Now, if you're new to motion and you want to go 2-DOF with this pivot kit, you're going to get just the right amount of immersion and you're going to be happy with what you got. And you can upgrade later on as you go. Now, looking at different haptic effects, when it comes to TC, ABS, tire slip and lock, the effects are very, very similar. Of course, a 3-DOF kit will always be a better setup, but we all know not everybody can afford a full motion setup. But with this new kit from Qubic, it gives you the ability to get the very similar feeling to a 3-DOF setup for half the price. And you get the ability to upgrade later on down the road when you have enough cash or when you're ready to upgrade to a 3-DOF kit and take your immersion to the next level. So anyways, I'm getting back into racing. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so when we have more videos coming out. And until next time, guys, have fun racing. Later.